Good luck, everybody. Thank you.
Floor is yours, Susan.
Okay. Are people coming in?
Everyone's in.
Okay. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for coming to the District 18 Breakfast Club this morning. A quick note about next month on April 11th, our guests will be the two sheriff candidates, and then from 7:30 to 8:30, and then at 8:30, Max Sokol, a candidate for District 18, will have 30 minutes. And in May, we will have the judge candidates. And we may even be at the Tasty Diner next month for what could be a hybrid presentation. A lot is going to determine on what happens in the next few weeks. So today, as we all know, we have a 90-minute session that will fly by with 4 guests. The opening, closing, and answers to all questions will be 2 minutes. Each candidate will have 3 30-second rebuttals if they wish. Michael, who is the host of this Zoom session, will give candidates a notice when there are 30 seconds left. And after 30 seconds, we'll then mute the microphone of the speaker. We're going to begin with 2-minute opening statements, and the speakers will go alphabetically by last name. David Blair is the first. He's a lifelong Montgomery County resident, nonprofit leader, community advocate, and entrepreneur. After selling their business 10 years ago, David and his wife, Michael, have been embedded in nonprofit and community initiatives to address poverty, improve education, equity, tackle the wide-ranging policy challenges facing our county, protect the county's ability to pay for critical services, and more. The Blairs are raising their 6 children here in Montgomery County. David, the floor is yours.
Good morning, and thank you, Susan. It's great to see everybody on this early Monday morning. So no doubt I was blessed to grow up in Montgomery County with our incredible schools, the wide open places, and the welcoming, inclusive nature of Montgomery County, which very much aligns with my values. When a door opens up for me, I've always believed it's my duty to reach back and pull the next person through. I also have a healthy perspective of Montgomery County, and I've seen our county slipping. And so 10 years ago, when I sold our business, I jumped headfirst into nonprofit and advocacy initiatives to move our county forward. And it was through that lens that I saw that how deep our challenges were. So I actually ran for county executive 4 years ago, came up a little bit short. I'm running again because by so many metrics, our county is headed in the wrong direction, whether it's our schools that are no longer the best in the county or the country, whether it's our jobs, we're losing good paying jobs. We've made our county is so expensive that so many people that work here can't afford to live here. And then we saw through the pandemic how it exacerbated all the inequities that were already here in the county. And I say all that, and I'm incredibly optimistic. We live in an amazing place. We have the smartest people in the world live right here in Montgomery County. We have the know-how to address our most vexing problems. And we have the funds. We're one of the richest counties in the country as well. What we're missing is a fresh perspective and executive leadership.
30 seconds.
That's what I spent my career doing. As an executive leader, you're leading teams to do great things. And that's how I built a Fortune 500 company in Rockville, Maryland. So let me end with where I started. I was blessed to grow up in Montgomery County because no doubt people made sacrifices before me. And now it's my turn to make sacrifices, run for county executive, bring the executive leadership that we need so that it's a great place for future generations. Thank you again.
Okay, our next candidate is Mark Elridge. Mark Elridge has served as county exec since December of 2018, and prior to that was an at-large council member for 12 years. He taught elementary school for 17 years at a high poverty school in Tacoma Park, served as a Tacoma Park City Council member, and was a co-founder and worker manager of the Tacoma Park Co-op. He led the successful effort to reform the county's charter, lead sponsor of the bill to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour, and is the primary architect of the bus rapid transit system currently under development. Mark, you're on.
So thank you very much, and I'm glad to see so many people here this morning. I'm a proud father and a grandfather, and my grandkids are African American, and they one of them has graduated college, one should graduate college next year, the other one's at Blair, third, and the other one's she's only 13, 14 years old now. She's growing up. I'm a former at-large council member and an elementary school teacher, and so I saw firsthand what is happening in the schools and the change in education and the change in the effectiveness of school programming in the time that I was in the school system. We've had a very difficult 3 years for the most part. I walked into office and the first thing I was handed was a $44 million shortfall in the previous budget that we had to make major cuts for. That was capped by a $50 million reduction in state aid before we submitted the budget to the council. And then I've had two budgets that are basically same service budgets over the last 2 years, and that's pretty much due to COVID. Despite all that, we've been able to maintain our AAA bond rating, and this budget is the first budget where we're actually able to say we've budgeted for 10% reserves. And the good news is by hitting 10%, we are not going to be spending millions and millions of dollars trying to move toward the 10% level. At the same time, we've been planning for a post-COVID future, and we've done that with an eye on equity. We've made investments in early childhood education, maintained fully funding of the schools through all of this. We've been working on an intentional economic development plan that actually works, and you can see it in the cranes and in the new businesses that are coming into the county. We've improved processes for businesses in the county. That was one of the first things we tackled. We've increased our contracting with local businesses. We've got a multi-pronged approach to climate change, and we're moving forward, particularly first on the transportation front, but also with the greening of the county's own buildings. We've been able to get increased support from the federal government. And we've done some innovative housing projects that include home ownership for low-income people, projects that are different than what was done before. So despite the pandemic, we've been working on building what I think is going to be a bright future for the county. We are in a very different position than we were when I came into office. And the fact that our revenues are growing, and which is a product of the changes that you all made when you voted to change the tax structure in the county, is actually beginning to show up. And it's going to enable us to do some things in this budget that are very different than the previous three budgets. And I think folks are going to see a lot of the things they wanted embodied in the budget that's going forward. And I'm excited about being able to do that. I think there will be a lot of happy people in the county. We still have revenue issues. And I think anybody who thinks you can just simply spend and spend and spend, we are still not at the point. I don't think we ever were, but we certainly haven't reached the point where money isn't an issue and we can do everything we want to do, but we're sure able to do a lot more than we've been able to do in the past. And I'm looking forward to revealing the budget tomorrow, and everybody will be able to see where we think we'll be able to go. So I'm optimistic. I think that the investments we made in changing our procurement policies and our Department of Permitting Services were really key to getting people to be interested to come to Montgomery County. I've had to talk to a lot of people about why this is different and why they could expect a different experience than they thought they would expect in Montgomery County. It's been successful. I think, we just landed Horizon Therapeutics, a large Irish biotech company. I personally met with the leadership team they brought down here and was able to assure them that they'd be able to get their projects through our planning processes in a reasonable time. So I think I'll stop there because I'm sure I'm right at 2 minutes.
Okay, next we have Tom Hooker. Tom Hooker's career is focused on working to make government more responsive and effective. He started his career as a community organizer and environmental activist and went on to be an executive for a nonprofit, followed by 8 years in the Maryland House of Delegates from District 20, and is now in his 8th year as a council member representing District 5. As president of the council in 2021, Tom chaired the county's Board of Health during the height of COVID-19. Tom lives in Silver Spring with his wife, Amy, a clinical social worker who works on behalf of at-risk children and families, with their young sons, Sam and Will, who participate in a language immersion program in the Montgomery County Public Schools. Tom, you're on.
Thank you, Susan, for organizing this. Thanks, everybody, for being here. I very much hope we're all together at the Tasty Diner again soon. Thanks, Susan, for the introduction. You all know me. I'm a parent of 2 boys in public schools. I've come to this work as a 20-year community organizer and nonprofit director, and represented Montgomery County as a state delegate for 8 years before being elected to the county council. From that front row seat, where I was elected by colleagues to serve as the council president and vice president during the recession and the pandemic, I've seen that Montgomery County is just not meeting its potential. We miss far too many opportunities. We're not being proactive, which means we can't get ahead of problems. So the data show we've indisputably been falling behind our neighboring jurisdictions in jobs and schools and housing and many other areas. And unfortunately, that won't be fixed without new leadership, which is why I've given up my safe re-election to get us back on track. Because of all places, Montgomery County has more problems than we should tolerate and more solutions than we're using. I love Montgomery County. I know that if we bring our community together again, as we did under Ike Leggett, we can succeed again. I have a very different approach. My whole career, I've been bringing people together to solve problems. I know you solve problems by listening to people closest to the problem. You look for common ground, you get buy-in from everyone, you collaborate. And that kind of listening and working together gets results. Of all of us, I have an unmatched record of accomplishments in government and of bringing diverse stakeholders together to get things done, because I cultivate, respect, and value my relationships. I disagree without being disagreeable, and I know how to leverage relationships at all levels of government to break down silos and solve problems. That's why I was elected twice by my colleagues to lead us through the pandemic and recession. As chair of the Board of Health through 2021, worked with all my colleagues to lead the pandemic response. Dr. Fauci saluted the council under my leadership for our important work. We also won an award from both the NAACP for our civil rights work and from an affordable housing group as well. But this election is really about the future, and I have a future for what Montgomery County can and should be again. I have the skills and the track record in government to carry it out. We essentially have 2 Montgomery counties with long-standing but increasing inequities.
30
We
seconds.
have to address the decline in our schools, bring back jobs, address racial equity, build the housing we need, and fight climate change. And we have to bridge the gap between the 2 Montgomery counties and solve problems with urgency, not just talk about them. I'm so grateful to meet with you all this morning. I know you all have the answers with our other residents. And if you vote for me to be county executive, I'll listen to you and work with you to make them a reality, just as I have for years. Thank you so much.
Okay, Hans Remer is our next candidate. Hans Remer has represented the entire county, serving as an at-large member of the county council for 12 years. He chairs the council's Planning, Housing, and Economic Development Committee and has been an outspoken leader on smart growth and housing. Before serving on the council, Hunt served as Barack Obama's National Youth Vote Director and also organized national campaigns that defeated the privatization of Social Security. He lives in Tacoma Park with his wife, Angela, and their 2 sons who attend the Montgomery County Public School System. Hans, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, D18 Democrats. Great to be with you today. Hope you had a great weekend. I'm running for county executive because our county needs leadership with a vision for the future. We need leadership that has a vision of this county as a dynamic and evolving community. Leadership that embraces progress, wants to help our community change over time, is willing to make the tough decisions that it's going to take for us to get ahead of the curve, and a leadership that wants to seize possibilities and create resources for our future and for our community so that we can drive our equity agenda and so that our kids and grandkids have a future here. As Susan said, I'm the parent of 2 boys and really love being a parent, and I want to be a grandparent one day, and maybe I will. I'm concerned that on the path that we're on, the best that I might be able to hope for is that our kids work in Virginia. But without change, they'll probably work in California or in Texas or in Boston or in North Carolina. We have to embrace the private sector in this county. We need more jobs. We need more housing. We've got a real shortage and of both. And the consequences for us are really significant. We want families to be able to stay together. That means living here in our community. That means growing opportunities and growing progress. So I think the county executive's path is a path of stagnation and decline. And today we have fewer private sector jobs than we had 10 years ago. You can see the visible evidence of the regional shifts in the economy. When you go to Virginia, you can see all the buildings and all the logos. While we do have great progress in life sciences now, our county executive
30 seconds.
on opposing smart growth, opposing accessory dwelling units, trying to single track the purple line, opposing 5G, failing to manage the return to school, kowtowing to the police union, blocking solar in farmland areas. These are the kind of decisions that are holding us back. So I want to work with you to make this county as amazing as it can be. And I ask for your support in this election. I'm running as a public finance candidate, not taking any funds from PACs or corporations, totally grassroots powered, and I need your help. Let's make it happen.
Okay, now we're going to start the questions. Every question that was asked at least 2 times by people sending in questions. The first one, as is always the case, was asked by at least a half a dozen people. So here we go again. For people who come, it's the same question. The most often asked question: what is your view on the widening of 495 and 270 and the addition of express lanes? And we will start with, in this order, Tom Hucker, David Blair, Hans Riemer, and Mark Elridge.
Thanks, Susan. That is a great question. I'm glad it's asked. As I think almost everybody here knows, I had led our effort to roll back the governor's unfortunate plan to supersize the Beltway. And I was successful at taking away some of the worst aspects of it. I worked with 30 different environmental and civic groups to organize 2 massive rallies in Silver Spring. Over 1,000 people turned out. I worked with our Department of Transportation to organize a press conference where I presented an alternative to the governor's alignment. And then I brought that to the Board of Public Works, which then committed to study that alignment. And we put so much pressure on the Board of Public Works and the governor that he removed the proposed widening of the northern section of the Beltway from the proposal. The proposal has continued to move forward, unfortunately, and it's moved forward in a more limited way. But we have to continue to monitor it and push for both environmental protections and fiscal protections. I led the effort on the council, even after Mr. Riemer organized my colleagues to support the project. I led an effort to write a letter to the Board of Public Works insisting on a fiscal assessment by Treasurer Kopp, which had been denied the opportunity to provide the fiscal assessment that we do for all our public-private partnerships.
30 seconds.
So I've been proud of the huge momentum and success that we've had. Unfortunately, it's been too limited, and we really need to deeply invest in transit and other alternatives rather than just simply widening the Beltway with an unaccountable public-private partnership. Thank you.
David Blair, followed by Hans Riemer and Mark Elridge.
So we've been discussing the need to address the congestion on 270 and the bottleneck at American Legion Bridge for over a decade. And the managed lane project now is rapidly moving forward. And so the job of the county executive is to protect the interests of the impacted communities. And so I would ensure that when the plan that the state ultimately moves forward with doesn't impact or infringe on private property, that the P3 contract that we're going to execute, that the state's going to execute, is financially sound and doesn't leave taxpayers holding the bag like they did with the purple line. We need to make sure that the tolls are reasonable and that the funds go to the much needed transit projects that we've been promised. But let's go to the bigger issue here, which is jobs. right? We'll be having this conversation every 5 years if we don't start creating jobs in Montgomery County. It was estimated that before the pandemic, 200,000 commuters were leaving Montgomery County every single day for jobs, right? How wide can you make the American Legion Bridge if that's where all the jobs are going to be? So that's why over the past many years, probably 10 years, I've been working on this economic development plan that we put forward last year about how we're going to actually reverse that trend and start creating private sector jobs here in Montgomery County. Thank you, Susan.
Okay, are you ready, Susan?
Take it away, Hans.
Okay, take it away. Thank you, Michael. So should we just begin when it's time and you're keeping track? Is that right, Michael?
Yes.
Sir,
Okay,
you just
great.
lost 4 seconds.
Oh, come on. All right. Well, thank you for the question. The Montgomery County Council advocated to remove the Beltway through Silver Spring from the governor's plan. We advocated that the governor would require the contractor to build dedicated on and off ramps for bus rapid transit so that we could have a bus rapid transit solution from Montgomery County to Northern Virginia. And the governor acceded to those demands. And those are significant. Those are very significant. The bus rapid transit infrastructure potentially is, well over $100 million in costs built into the project. The dropping of the Beltway was our #1 priority in the project. And, the governor acceded to our demands. So I think the question is, how are we going to have a strong, predictable, reliable connection to Virginia? And, maybe if the job growth in the region wasn't entirely happening in Virginia, it wouldn't be such a big issue for us. But it is a big issue for us. Our residents need access to Virginia, and we want the population of Virginia to have access to our companies. And if we don't have that, we do indeed, I think, decline. So I am pleased that we managed to secure a commitment from the governor that the
34 seconds.
revenue would go to transit. And if you look at our budget now, for the first time ever, there are actually significant funds, hundreds of millions of dollars planned for the construction of bus rapid transit that comes from that toll revenue. So we're making progress on transportation infrastructure, but we got the Beltway out of that project. Thanks.
Mark Alrich.
You're muted, Mark.
That. Sorry. So I was opposed to the governor's project from the beginning. The first time I had my first discussion with the governor, he had done a presentation right after I was elected, and he had talked about his project, and there was no American Legion Bridge in the project. And I made the comment that if you were serious, you would start with the American Legion Bridge. And a month later, they started talking about the American Legion Bridge. I think everybody agreed you start at the point of the bottleneck, not at the back of the bottleneck. My office and myself worked throughout this, worked with Tom and with everybody else to make sure we organized people against the governor's proposal. The council had a longstanding policy of supporting reversible lanes on 270, and reversible lanes would work. And they are not only the least expensive solution, they're a solution that doesn't require turning this into a toll road. And that's one of the big benefits of the proposal. This didn't have to be a toll project. It could have not been a toll project. All of the things that Hans cites, we had already negotiated with Slater in terms of what they were going to give us. What we wanted was guarantee, particularly on the Beltway side, that they weren't going to go into the neighborhoods along the Beltway. I pointed out to Slater that there were 2 alternatives for dealing with the Beltway area, and he said those were alternatives that were proposed by competitors for Transurban, but they were not alternatives that Transurban picked, which I thought was interesting. The biggest problem, and one of the things I think that was done the most damage by the council
30 seconds.
was the premature agreement with the governor. This project doesn't solve anything north of the ICC. It leaves Frederick stranded, it leaves northern Montgomery County stranded. They have no plan, no contract, no nothing to take this thing north of the ICC. And even one of the principals of Transurban cited the bottleneck that is going to be created where this runs into the ICC as something that shouldn't come into existence. Traffic will actually get worse for northern Montgomery County. I supported a complete solution, which would have been reversibles from Frederick and down to the bridge. And what we wound up is a project that's not going to solve a lot of Montgomery County's problems, going to cost a lot of money. And I think if it's built the way the governor could build it, could be an environmental disaster.
I'm Mark. Thank you.
Okay, on the next question, the order is Reamer, Hucker, Elrich, and Blair.
Susan,
What?
I just wanted a chance to offer a rebuttal.
Oh, okay. 30 seconds.
Well, I don't think the county executive is being straight with you here. I mean, he just said he opposes toll revenue and he thinks the project should have no tolls, but he negotiated a deal with the state to use all the toll revenue to pay for transit. How can you have both of those things? The idea that he actually had an impact focusing on the bridge, that is fiction. That is totally fiction. So, you know, the county needs to be a partner to the state to get this right for the future of our community. The lack of a connection to Virginia is a major problem. We've got to widen the bridge. I do support reversible north of 270.
Time, Hans. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next question. The order is Reamer, Hucker, Elrich, and Blair. When the person ahead of you is done, please just go forward in that order. The question is, what is your plan to expand affordable housing in Montgomery County?
Well, thank you so much for that question. Montgomery County is a housing shortage community, and that is a serious problem for us. The door is closing to this county for young families, for people who want to move here mid-career, start a new business, for empty nesters, because there's just not enough housing. And if you look at the West Coast, what you see is housing shortage communities result in homelessness. They create a social crisis because housing is the most fundamental aspect of your life, whether you have access to a housing that you can afford. We have a housing affordability crisis at every level, and it's killing the workforce in this county. We have to be a place where companies can hire, and having a housing shortage is strangling our potential in the future. So we've got to do something about that. I have enacted many reforms, whether that's accessory dwelling units or master plans that rezone the county where the market wants to be able to grow, to allow for new housing, financing to create dedicated low-income housing opportunities, even in our most expensive areas, raising the requirement for developers for the amount of affordable housing that they have to build in affluent communities. And along the way, the county executive has opposed us at every turn. He even voted against the downtown Bethesda master plan. He voted against the master plan for Littonsville. How can you vote against more jobs in housing in Bethesda, my friends? How can you vote against a future affordable community?
30 seconds.
That is how you get a housing shortage. We have to allow the market to produce housing. We got to get our public resources behind more housing. And if we don't, our kids and grandparents will not, kids and grandkids will not, and our grandparents will not have a future in this county. And we need leadership that gets it and is willing to work on making a change. Done.
Thanks, Susan. Look, quality and affordable housing is a fundamental right for every resident, and we have to start thinking about it that way and acting as if we actually believe that. We have a housing crisis. Not everyone here believes that, but I serve on the board of the Council of Governments with Nancy Navarro. We voted to hire the Urban Institute, to hire the best experts we could find to study the regional housing crisis. And we adopted their report and we brought that to the county council and it passed unanimously. Unfortunately, the administration we have doesn't believe that we have an affordable housing crisis and doesn't believe in the report. But the council unanimously does. And we're still having this discussion, a generation after we've adopted smart growth as our plan, which means building more housing near public assets like transit. So we have to address this and not just talk, because now we have nearly half of our renters spending 35% or more of their income on housing costs, and we have an overall shortage of housing units at the lowest and the middle income levels all across the county. The Council of Governments goal that we all adopted unanimously sets a commitment to 4,100 housing units or homes per people a year for 10 years. And last year, the county government only hit less than 30% of that. That's why late in 2020, we followed the data and the advice of our nonpartisan experts. We passed a new growth and infrastructure policy that will lead to more development in the right places by the
30
right
seconds.
types of projects, especially with our nonprofits. 75% of them have to be affordable under the Council of Governments goals. It lowers the cost of new projects that are sensible and embraced by the community. And that's why under my presidency, the council received an award by an affordable housing group, we're building together for our innovative approach and our record commitment to affordable housing. We need to move a lot farther in this direction if we're going to keep our commitment to the region and not be left behind by the DC and Prince George's County and Fairfax and Arlington. Thank you.
Who's next, Susan? Is it Mark or David?
I think it's me.
Go ahead, Mark.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. A couple of things to point out. My objection to the ULI report wasn't the total number. It was the skewing of what of the incomes of the people that they reported on, because the ULI report neglected to point out that Montgomery County had a higher minimum wage, which meant that the amount of affordability that the county had to achieve was in a slightly different bracket than the report showed. And that was actually corrected by a subsequent park and planning study that slightly rejiggered where the housing needed to be. But this housing crisis is real, and it's not going to be dealt with the way we're dealing with it. Hans and Tom like to talk about what they did on the council with the zoning, and they're running a campaign that there's no housing and no jobs, and they're the architects of the policies that have produced no housing and no jobs. So you can't take credit for what you did and then not take credit for the fact that it hasn't produced what it was supposed to produce. The housing in Bethesda is stunningly expensive. I don't know where you get the idea that the housing is affordable, but it's not. I'll give you an example. The Cambridge, I think it's Cambridge Manor. This was in the Bethesda Beach story, 400 new units, 60 MPDUs. The previous building was 87 units. Almost all those units were affordable to people at about 75 to 80% of area median income. And those units are going to be gone. 87 affordable units gone, 60 MPDUs in their place.
30 seconds.
This is not building a future for more people in Montgomery County. I've looked at the rents in Bethesda. There is an enormous gap between the MPDU prices and the prices for the market rate housing. And I guess if you believe in the Koch brothers philosophy that simply building more housing will reduce the price of housing, you can believe that. That's not actually true. Montgomery County has only about 4,500 remaining MPDUs under its control of the total 16,000 that were built between 1975 and 2020.
So it's absolutely a fundamental right that if you work in this county, you should be able to afford to live in this county. And when I'm at events with nurses, first responder, folks in the trades, I'm going to ask for a show of hands how many people live in the county. You're lucky if half of them actually can afford to live here in Montgomery County. We were with Adventist Healthcare last week, and I was talking to their leadership crew. They need to hire 600 nurses in the next 2 years. The number one thing their CEO said, access to affordable housing. And what drives me crazy about this county is we actually have great places. So think about like Forest Glen or Shady Grove or White Flint. We have areas where you have access to transit. You could have beautiful mixed income, mixed use neighborhoods. And this is where people want to live and work, right? It's where my 25-year-old son would want to go rather than Arlington, right? So he could go down the elevator, jump on the metro. But it's interesting, like the zoning at White Flint, it's been zoned for years for mixed income, mixed use areas. And when you ask the developers, when you ask the learners, why aren't they building? Jobs, because they recognize that people actually want to live where they work. And if the jobs are in Virginia, that's where they're going to invest. And that's why I spend so much time on how are we going to get jobs back here in Montgomery County. So let me give you one aspect of my economic development plan. Hospitality. We should be the hospitality startup at the capital of the country. With what Marriott has done here over the past 100 years, or just think about all the spinoffs, right? So the other companies, whether it's Hilton or Host. And so my vision is we're going to actually have, I've talked to the leadership teams of these organizations. We're going to create incubators here so that we can be the startup capital. So no matter where you are in the country, if you have an idea for a new hospitality company, you want to come to Montgomery County because it's the place to be.
Susan, I'd like to rebut.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Tom.
I just wanted to respond to what the exec said about the county setting a policy of jobs and housing and not producing results. Remember Schoolhouse Rock very, very well. The legislative branch creates policies, that's true, and we budget for them. It's the job of the executive branch to carry them out. It doesn't work that way in Montgomery County because we can set a policy where we guarantee everybody a safe place to live, but the executive branch unfortunately doesn't believe in that policy, so that's why they're not carrying it
Tom,
out.
thank you.
Every housing developer and provider in this county, they'll say that.
Okay.
I would like,
Next.
Susan, I would like to rebut as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. You're on.
I think the county executive's comments comparing those of us who want more housing in the county to the Koch brothers is incredibly destructive. I mean, that kind of politics is, it's why we can't have nice things. It's why our kids don't have the future here that they should. We have to think a little bit differently about housing and demagoguery and, you know, political attacks against challenging solutions for our housing shortage is just not going to get us there. So, you know, it's not just downtown Bethesda, folks. It's his opposition to housing in Silver Spring, in Rockville. It's everywhere.
Okay, the next question.
Whoa.
Oh,
Susan?
yep, you're on. Go for it.
Yeah, real quickly. First place, the county does not have a policy that addresses the 75% affordability requirements of the plan. It is not the government executive branch does not build housing. All we do is approve housing. We approve pretty much everything that is walked through our door. In fact, I don't have the ability not to approve. So if it's not being built, it's because it's sitting in a pipeline. And we all know the pipeline in Montgomery County is very large. And Tom can shake his head all he wants, but the county executive and no executive branch has ever built housing. That's
Fine,
why
Mark,
we
thank
get
you.
so little.
Okay, next question in this order. Elrich, Reamer, Blair, and Hucker. Elrich, Reamer, Blair, and Hucker. Rising crime rates is an issue across the nation and is becoming a serious problem here. If elected, what will you do first to make what will you do to make us all feel safer? And we'll start with Mark.
Okay. I made a couple of things. One is we're sending over to the council for the second time a police contract that would address the pay discrepancies in the police department that hopefully will move some distance to letting us attract more police to the county. Our recruit class this year is down to 11, which is even smaller than the previous recruit class. The other thing that we're doing is looking at trying to retrain the police and we're going through a long evaluation. The group we hired, ELE4A, is looking at 20,000 body cameras to look at the footage to see what's the difference between what we think our police are doing and what they're actually doing when they're out there on the street. And policies will come out of that to address what we think are real concerns that the community has. But the police have to be adequately resourced. They have to be reasonably paid. And somehow we've got to come to the point where we can have a more reasonable dialogue in the community because they certainly feel battered. Some of the problems we had in Silver Spring were decisions that people made about how they were going to approach policing, which kind of surprised me based on how they feel and what they feel the public wants them to do or doesn't want them to do. And we've made clear to them that the job is still the job and that, to put it bluntly, that you don't have to worry about being on camera if you're not worried about something on camera being something you shouldn't be doing. We have got to continue to work through, we've got to continue to work through the nature of policing in Montgomery County. We certainly need more mental health facilities. We've hired more people to go on the street, or this budget will put more people on the street. We need mental health facilities. I've actually asked at Venice to give me a plan for restoring community mental health clinics. You can't do all this in the schools. And not everybody who's committed a crime or is in stress is a student. And this
Time.
county used to have mental health clinics. We're looking at what it would cost to bring mental health clinics back.
Hans?
All right, thank you so much. Well, I think the county executive has had misplaced priorities and has been slow to respond to the public safety challenges, and also has failed to provide leadership on police reform. I think we both need a strong, effective policing response, and we need a continuing reform agenda to build public support for policing so that more people will want to become great police officers. And it's not just a matter of compensation, it's a matter of the broader context of policing in America. And we need to provide leadership here. If you look at what has happened in downtown Silver Spring, I took my kid out for ice cream about a month ago, and I was sitting on Ellsworth about 9:30 at night before a late movie. We went to see West Side Story at the EFI, and I didn't feel safe. It was the first time in my life, really, sitting there at night that I didn't feel safe. And you know what? Last night, there was a man that tried to get into society with a gun, and the police had to chase him and apprehend him several blocks away. The businesses in Silver Spring demanded a safety summit about 6 weeks ago. The county executive had no action plan in place. And what we found was that the police were understaffed in the core business district, and they weren't being attentive to the night scene that is going on there, providing effective response. So we all work together with the businesses to put the focus there and say, we need aggressive response there. We need to be on the ground. And things have gotten a little better thanks to that moment. But I think the county executives team
30 seconds.
really wasn't on the beat. On the other hand, when it comes to reforming how we do policing, I think the county executive really falls in line with the police union. And compensation is not going to solve policing in this county or in America. You've got to be willing to break the hold that the police union has over public policy and how we do police work. And the county executive won't make them get vaccinated, backs them on discipline reform, one issue after the next. So I'll be an executive who puts you first, puts the community first, and keeps us safe while changing the nature of how policing does its work.
David?
So I look at this in two ways. So short term, probably the most important job of the county executive is keeping you safe. And so we need to move with a level of urgency to address the increases that we've seen in crime. And so certainly bringing in the community leaders, bringing in our chief of police, understanding what's going on. I mentioned at a forum previously about, kind of some of the moves that we've made really have you scratching your head about eliminating the auto task force or eliminating police positions. So we need to move with urgency. I certainly think publicly supporting our police is a good place to start. Increasing police pay, recruiting a more diverse police, those are all make lots of sense, and we should pursue that. But let's look about this longer term, right? And think about the bigger picture, which is what's the root cause of so much of this crime? And think about poverty. And over the last decade, it's estimated that 1 out of 4 of our Montgomery County public high school graduates isn't ready for a career or college. What have we done? Right? We basically sentenced them to a string of minimum wage jobs. And what's crazy is, as running for county executive, I see this huge picture. And on one hand, I see so many jobs that are available. When I meet with, let's say, healthcare companies, they need lab technicians, or when I see the trades groups, even auto tech, like I see these good paying jobs, $50,000, $60,000 a year. And on the other hand, when I'm working with the nonprofit community, I see all of these folks are saying, David, we can't find livable wages.
30
So I
seconds.
think one of the roles that the Montgomery County executive can play is connecting those two dots, right? Recognizing where there's career opportunities that can pay a living wage and finding those people and then working to get them trained so that they can earn those wages. Thank you.
Tom?
Thanks, Susan. This is a big problem, and you have both a short-term problem and a long-term problem. Short-term, yes, absolutely. We need to fill police vacancies, which we haven't had a strategy to do. We do need to pay police more. I've been saying that for years. Only the county executive can negotiate police pay, but then we also need a county executive who has strong relationships with the council, works collaboratively with them, and moves his agenda through the county council, doesn't just phone it in and send it over there and then throw up his hands if the council doesn't pass it. What I've always supported higher police pay. I will again when we receive that proposal. Secondly, police accountability. We have to hold our police accountable as part of making communities safe as well. I just passed the body camera bill to react to the fact that 2 of our police abused our 5-year-old child at East Silver Spring Elementary School in my district. And the county executive, unfortunately, signed the bill, but he's still fighting the civil lawsuit from the family in court that has been harmed 2 years ago by our police. So we really need to settle that and provide some measure of closure to that family. Long term, we have to do more than just get police back into those vacancies. We have to use our police well. The current chief and county exec ended the carjacking and auto theft unit. And so now we've seen a rise in carjacking and auto theft. That was predictable. And now they're restoring that because we've had this rise in crime. Long term, we need to increase our mental health resources because people are under unprecedented stress. I've pushed for successfully expanding mobile crisis units across the county so we could deal with our residents that are in crisis. And we absolutely need to expand community mental health. I wish we'd been doing that over the last several years. Thank you. We have to be proactive and not just talk.
Okay. Okay, next, the next question in alphabetical order. When it's your turn, just start speaking. Concern is often raised about Montgomery County's lagging economic development and declining jobs number. What is your plan to improve these trends to grow our economy and ultimately our tax base? Starting with David Blair.
So thank you, Susan. As I've kind of alluded to about the lack of jobs is really hurting our county. And as a businessman, early in my career, I was working with the Catholic hospital system, and on the wall when you walk in, it said, "No margin, no mission." Meaning, if you don't watch your bottom line, you can't pursue your mission. When I think about the mission in Montgomery County, right, it's that welcoming, inclusive culture that we've created. Well, that's expensive. And it's the jobs that pay for that. And what I've seen over the past decade or so is really alarming. We've actually lost 35% of our information technology jobs have left, which is crazy. We're in the information technology age, right? So what I would do is a whole bunch of things, which really has to do with leveraging what we have here. I talked about hospitality. Let me give you another thing that I would do: entrepreneurship. So we live in this amazing place where 1/3 of our residents were born outside the United States. That's entrepreneurial, right? So they're learning a new culture, a new system, maybe a new language, yet we're lagging behind the region in new businesses. That's crazy. So I opened up an entrepreneurship lab at the University of Shady Grove a couple of years ago. I would propose doing that in all of our high schools, right? So because we need thousands and thousands of these new startups. And I, as a business executive, when I was doing business in Rockville, I knew it was challenging. And then as I started doing business in all other 50 states, I was like, wow, Montgomery County is the most challenging place to do business. And I'm not exaggerating. So I have really good sense about what it will take these startups to thrive and grow. And then that's our tax base that can fund our priorities like affordable housing and good education systems.
Okay, Mark. Let's move quickly now alphabetically.
So we've been working on a variety of different approaches to this. When I came into office, the first thing I did was work with Sydney Katz to do a listening tour of businesses in Montgomery County, to have them tell us what they think is wrong with us. Out of that have come about procurement reforms. I introduced a bill to give local preference to local businesses, so more business stays in Montgomery County, even a preference in terms of price, because we realize that if the local business is in Montgomery County, we collect the tax revenues and everything else from that business. If it's a Prince George's County or Fairfax County business, we don't get that. So we've worked on procurement, worked on permitting. We wanted to make sure that we can turn the permitting process into a source of criticism and get the businesses that have had trouble with it to become advocates for the county. And that's something we've actually been able to do. You can see it in the life sciences. We've got record amounts of labs coming into Montgomery County, almost 3 million square feet. that we know about right now, and it looks like almost another 3 million square feet of labs to come. This is the most explosive growth of lab space and life science companies that we have ever had. It is really, really significant. We attracted $18.5 billion of private investment into the county. These are people who thought that the businesses they were investing in here were worth investing in. Along with the council, we reformed WorkSource Montgomery, which is a great source of embarrassment in its previous iteration. This
30
group
seconds.
has grown from 5 people to like 35 people. They are working with hundreds of county residents, and they're doing exactly what David talks about, which is trying to reskill people, not try to get them jobs where they are without skills, but to get them the skills so they can get higher paying jobs. We've got a MOU with University of Maryland on life sciences. You will soon see a project proposal from Maryland for White Flint that's pretty significant. They're interested in an AI center over there that focuses on life sciences and
Time, Mark. Thank you.
hospitality. And I can go more on that.
Tom?
Go ahead. The economy is a huge problem, Susan, and it needs to be, if you talk to every major investor, job creator in the county, they'll say the number one thing is it needs to be a priority at the county executive level. We need to value entrepreneurs who are investing their money and taking risks to create jobs. That has been a core Democratic value since before, since FDR and before that everyone deserves a living wage job and a safe place to live. And unfortunately, now we just don't have leadership that really prioritizes either. We need to revitalize our economy because we're the only county in the region that was losing jobs pre-COVID. We lost more jobs during COVID than any other county in the region. And we're now the only one still losing jobs post-COVID. Every other county in the DC region is creating jobs, but not us. We also, I have a long track record of bringing people together to create jobs. I'm pushing a prevailing wage bill through the council right now that will pass on the 22nd to hire our workers and use our contractors instead of not out-of-state low bid ones. I created a whole statewide coalition of 10 county council presidents, both of our US senators, all of our congressmen to push the governor to open up the rainy day fund during the pandemic. And we want $1 billion from the governor for our residents and small businesses. And I just passed with Councilmember Friedson, the biggest climate bill we've ever passed, the Green Buildings Now Act, which is going to create thousands of jobs retrofitting our building stock in Montgomery County. We also need to deeply invest in our small businesses. They're responsible for most of our new jobs. We need to treat them like an asset and not an afterthought. We need many more small business navigators and tiger teams to help them succeed, like Fairfax and Prince George's and Howard have, not the single one small business navigator we have for all of Montgomery County. That'll be my priority as county executive. Thank you.
Well, good morning, and thank you for that question. It's really important. I know that this election for county executive has focused a lot on economic development, but there's a reason for that. The county executive is the one elected official with the most responsibility for economic development, which is fundamentally about creating resources for our community. We need leadership in the county, and especially the county executive, to be focused on the future and on creating growing resources for our community and the people who live here, whether it's jobs for the future or the tax base, all of that together. So it is vitally important that we have leadership at the executive level that has a clear vision for economic development and is willing to put the right kind of decisions in place to get us there. We are in a serious problem, my friends. If you look at what has happened over the last 30 years, the entire regional economy has shifted to Northern Virginia. And you can see the clear evidence as you go to Dulles Airport with all the towers and the logos on those buildings. On the positive side, we do have growth in life sciences, although our rate of growth is not the same, as it is slower than Boston and San Francisco and North Carolina and other places that also have life science clusters. We've got a once in a generation opportunity to get it right. And I think we must take advantage of this moment. And that means a lot of things. It's also housing. We need housing for the workforce. It's transportation infrastructure. How about not single tracking the Purple Line, which is our biggest connection to the University of Maryland, which is a huge economic driver. The county executive
30 seconds.
Single tracking the Purple Line. How about creating walkable urban areas all along the Red Line corridor? County executive has been opposing those kinds of ideas. Branding the Purple Line as an innovation corridor. There's so much that we can do. to support a strong environment where our small businesses will succeed. We'll have high wage job growth, but we need leadership that gets it and is willing to make it a priority.
Okay, next question in this order, and
Susan.
please remember.
I'd like to rebut a couple
Okay,
things.
Mark.
Okay, really quickly. I never proposed single tracking the purple line. That purple line, when it goes into Bethesda, has to switch tracks on the way out because it can't return to Bethesda on the same track it arrived. My proposal was to move the switch outside the tunnel, which would have allowed the $50 million trail to go through there. I asked them to study it. They said they can't make it work. That's the extent of was to pull into the parking place, not the single track, the purple line. Two very different things. And if it had been feasible, it would have saved $50 million, which we could have spent on other important projects in Montgomery
Hi,
County.
Mark. Thank you. Susan?
Susan, I'd like to rebut that as well. I think I have my last rebuttal. I think what the executive just said is he'd like to put the parking space for the trains at the front of the tunnel instead of the back of the tunnel. You know, that proposal is one of the worst ideas that I think has ever been put forward. And, you know, I was actually accused by another candidate in this race of being like Trump for even challenging that ridiculous concept. The University of Maryland is our economic engine on this side of the region, and having the strongest possible connection to the University of Maryland has got to be one of our top economic development priorities. And what the executive proposed would limit the number of trains
I'm Hans. Thank you.
from Bethesda to the University of Maryland. It throttles the whole benefit of the program.
It's not true.
Okay. Now, we are going in this order. Please remember, guess Hucker, Blair, Reamer, and Elridge in that order. Hucker, Blair, Reamer, and Elridge. Over 50% of the budget in Montgomery County goes to education. We could spend the whole forum on education, but we aren't. In 2 minutes, tell us your priorities to wisely use this money and improve the quality of education for all students. Tom,
Thanks,
you're
Susan.
first.
Thanks, Susan. The main thing we need to do with the unprecedented funding we have in the school system is to have an equity approach to all our schools that addresses our longstanding opportunity gap in the schools that we haven't done enough to address with enough urgency in the last several years. Our students have been under unprecedented stress. I told you about my approach to leadership is talking to people who are the most affected and listening to them and finding the common ground to solve problems. That's why I've held 52 town halls during COVID, 52. The most recent one was on student mental health, and the one before that was on the emergency facing our schools when they reopened with in-person learning. I advertised that forum with 24 hours notice, and 5,500 people, 5,500 people turned out. Our students, our educators, our parents like myself, who are under unprecedented stress as our schools, with an inadequate plan that was inadequately communicated, returned to in-person learning. You could feel the tension. There were a lot of tears shed. You could feel the tension all morning as we listened to 2 hours of testimony. So what do we need to do? We need to apply the unprecedented amount of federal funding we have to address the opportunity gap in our schools. We need to address the gaps in our school system through an equity lens. We need to raise pay for our educators and make them competitive with other counties.
30
We're
seconds.
losing far too many educators to other counties because they are not paid enough, but also they're not supported. They're doing far too much work that's supposed to be done by our HHS workers. They're doing contact tracing. We're not testing students and staff when they walk in the building to see if they had COVID. We weren't doing that during the Omicron surge, and we should have been. DC and Baltimore were doing that. And we need to take an equity lens to the rest of our student needs. We need to invest deeply in the school nurses that we've had a gap of for years, and mental health resources. We also need to restore.
Thank you, Tom.
David?
Thank you, Susan. So clearly we need to address the vast inequities that we see in Montgomery County public schools. I would start really young. Because if we don't, the disparities are huge. So for example, only 8% of Black students are taking Algebra 1 in 7th grade, as compared to 39% of their peers. These are in our low-income schools. So I would start young. There's a program that I worked on in Durham, North Carolina. It's really simple. A nurse visits with a new mom 3 times during the baby's first 18 months. It talks about the importance of reading to your child, brain development, nutrition. It's proven to be successful. And what drives me crazy about Montgomery County, we actually do this. We actually do this in pilots. We actually have small pilots that actually have these programs, yet we haven't had the courage to scale it. Like, everyone should have access to that program, because if you want to adjust the achievement gap, you've got to start young. And that starts between 0 and 3. And then pre-K is a must. I mean, we must offer high quality pre-K for all of our families. And, you know, it's not a stretch. Washington, D.C. has it. West Virginia has it. My wife reminds me that Oklahoma has it. So we need to have pre-K. And the other thing that we need to do is we need to look at where our most experienced teachers and principals are. And what's scary is in our highest need schools, we have the principals with the least experience. That makes no sense. And so what we need to start doing is we need to pay our teachers and our principals more in those low income, high need areas, so that we can lift those scores, so that when those students get to 7th grade, they're all taking Algebra 1. And that'll be my priority as your county executive.
All right. Thank you for this. As a parent of 2 kids in the public schools, this is certainly one of my favorite topics, and one that I feel very passionately about. I think the first thing we need is an executive who has an agenda for education and is willing to work closely with the school system, and especially to manage the safe return to school in this pandemic era. And we know that the virus is not done with us, and it's going to be a continuing issue. And I think our county executive has really been asleep at the wheel for the most important responsibility of all, which is ensuring that our children have the chance to return safely and reliably to in-person education. The return to school in September went very badly. A lot of the guidance that was provided was botched. The return to school in January went very badly. The administration and the school system were very slow to put in place the measures that were needed, and they weren't really resolute about returning in person. And that was essential because it resulted in a lot of dissembling about critical measures that were needed to have in person be more safe. So the first thing I'll do is make sure that we are focused on remaining in person. It's not, we have to have some flexibility there. At the same time, we've got to make that happen. Now, our resources for schools, our educators need more resources in the classroom. We need more tutoring to help our students accelerate. We've lost so much ground in their educational progress. We
30
need
seconds.
after school programming. I will be a proud champion of universal after school programming, just as I've been at the county council creating programs that serve thousands of children now every school year. Career pathways, working with nonprofits on new STEM learning and workforce aligned programs, and continuing to build out the University of Maryland's investments here, the Maryland system, with universities at Shady Grove and Montgomery College. So we have a big, expansive education agenda. And I look
Time,
forward to-
Hans. Thank you.
Mark, it's your turn.
So there are a lot of opportunities to work with the school system, and I welcome the leadership that has come to the school system. I will try to remind my colleagues that the school system is a state agency. They are independent, and despite some of the advice that our health people gave them about how to manage some of these things, the school system made its own decisions. I don't think it's useful to get into fights over that. And they have a board, they choose the path they chose, and they chose some things that I probably would have done differently. That said, I think there are some really important initiatives out there. We continue to expand early childhood education. That was one of the things I said I would keep expanding. We continue to put more money into early childhood education. That is one of the most critical things. I used to be a school teacher. I know the difference, what it means, whether a student comes to school prepared or whether the student comes to school not prepared. So this has been really important for me. We are working with both Montgomery College and the school system on school to Montgomery College and USG pipelines for some of the talent we need. We have struggled, the school system has struggled to grow a diverse workforce and to attract new people. And one of the things you find if you look at data is that very few minorities graduate from educational institutions, particularly with degrees in elementary education. And if we're not getting external to Montgomery County, we need a pathway. And I think there's a consensus emerging, not just around teachers, but some other critical positions, that we should be doing this here in the county.
30
We should
seconds.
be doing it deliberately in the county. We continue to work with the school system in general on use of their buildings after school. We are, continue to expand programs to provide opportunities to students after school. So I think, I don't think there's much difference between any of us in terms of what we would like to do with the school system. I will say that, the council has struggled to fund the school system. In 21, I proposed a school budget that was $40 million larger than what the council passed.
Time. Thank you, Mark.
Okay.
Okay, next is
Susan, can I
my
rebut?
choice.
Susan,
Tom, okay.
I wanted to rebut. Thank you. Real quickly, the county exec's approach, saying that the school system's in a silo and we just have to defer to what they want, reflects the fact that we need a county executive that gets everyone in the room to work out differences and to lead, not just allow people to work in silos. We have a mental health crisis. I propose 26 social workers, one for every high school. County executive and his HHS opposed that. Now we have a capital budget that's $187 million down the last 3 years. That resulted, the county exec proposed delays in Woodward High School construction, Northwood High School,
Tom, thank you.
Sims. We restored the funding for that at the council level.
Okay,
Susan?
our next, is there someone else who wants to speak?
Yeah, Susan, let me just jump in too, because I lose all energy when I hear that the county executive doesn't have oversight of the schools. And of course they don't, but real leadership is working together to accomplish great things. And so there's no doubt that there's alignment here. So some of the things that are important to me about whether it was entrepreneurship or buying local, those are important to me, and working with the superintendent and the board. This can be very much a collaborative relationship because the county executive actually represents everybody in this county, including our students.
Thank you, David. Mark.
Okay.
This is your last one, Mark.
Okay. So real quickly, a couple of things. First of all, working with people through disagreements is one thing, but it doesn't mean you always get your way at the end of that. And so we didn't get what we thought we were going to get from the school system on a couple of issues, and that's just life. It didn't mean if I was the dictator, then I could have done something differently, but I'm not, and neither will any of you be. On the terms of the school budget and the capital budget, I'm working with the spending affordability guidelines that the council provided. The council has not provided enough money for school construction in any of these budgets. And this this is not the council's
Time,
fault,
Mark.
but
Thank
this,
you.
okay.
Okay, the next question is in this order: Elrich, Reamer, Blair, and Hucker. Elrich, Reamer, Blair, and Hucker. 17 states and jurisdictions in Alaska, Minnesota, and South Dakota have adopted control models dealing with the sales of distilled spirits, beer, and wine through government agencies. These jurisdictions represent approximately 25% of the nation's population and 23% of distilled sales and a smaller percentage of beer and wine. It is thought to be a method of protecting the health, safety, and welfare of the community. And in addition, the Montgomery County Alcohol Beverage Service, or ABS, pumps approximately $37 million into the budget that is critical to pay bond debts that help MoCo maintain our AAA bond rating. What are your plans for ABS if elected? Again, Elridge, Reamer, Blair, and Hucker.
My plans are to continue to expand it, to revitalize their stores, to build bigger stores so they can have more selection. They're doing alcohol-only stores so they can go into areas where there are wine shops, private wine shops, and not compete with the wine shops, but sell distilled spirits, which only the county's allowed to do. I think these are good things, and I'm going to continue to do that. The $37 million, my goal is to grow that to $50 million. And when that money is done financing Montrose Parkway, that money can come and finance other things in Montgomery County that are important. We could have a regular stream of funding that could go to the school system. We could have a regular stream of money that went to the transportation system, where you could split it between both. So I think it's a mistake to get rid of that system. People fantasize about what it would be like without it. The fact is, Maryland is a monopoly state, period. There are 7 monopolies. They don't compete against each other. Pricing is uniform. Pricing is set. Nobody gets special discounts. So not much would change, which is why nobody needs Montgomery County's warehouse, because the 7 big distributors in the state of Maryland will simply add space in their warehouses to accommodate what products they sell in Montgomery County. There is no competition in the current model. And so it doesn't change anything that the county does. So I think the revenue is worth it. If this was a money-losing proposition, I think you could question whether we should be involved in it, but it's a money-making proposition, and there is no way to
30
replace
seconds.
there's no way to replace those funds. The state is not going to carve out of their revenue a piece of the pie from Montgomery County and not carve it out for every other county in the state of Maryland. So it's delusional to think we're going to get some special source of money out of the state if we give up our liquor. If we give up the liquor sales, we give up the revenues. It's as simple as that. We have well-paid jobs. We have workers with benefits. It works, and I would like to make it better.
Hans Remer.
Well, thank you so much for that question. I have worked a lot on liquor reform in my time at the council. And when I took office, I made a vow to myself that I was going to make changes on liquor policy. And I've made some changes. If you've been in one of the amazing breweries in this county, or the distilleries, or if you've been up to where the wineries are starting to come in Clarksburg, or you've been to a meadery or a cidery, they're all over in rural areas, in industrial areas, in urban areas. And that's because of the laws that we changed to open the door, whether it's zoning prohibitions on those facilities or other kinds of restrictions that were in place. And we now have a thriving local sector, and I'm really proud of that. Hundreds of jobs, and a higher quality of life for all of us. I would get us out of the liquor industry, liquor business. I'm the only candidate in the race who really supports that. And I think we have to get there one step at a time. But I think the first focus now should be on allowing grocery stores to sell beer and wine. And I know that at least Mr. Elrich and Mr. Hucker have not supported that in the past. I think consumers need it. They deserve it. They should not have to go to multiple stores to get their convenience like beer and wine. And I think that is a crucial step for us to take moving forward. And then, we've got to figure out a plan with the state and the state legislators to get out of this. That money comes from the inconvenience of our residents. And I think people are over it. They're ready for the modern choices that
30
most
seconds.
communities have in this country. And I think we can make that happen if we're thoughtful and we have leadership that is committed to it. But, for the short term, I think the priority needs to be on getting beer and wine in the grocery stores, and then continuing to support our local sector. And then for the long term, we got to get out of the industry entirely. We don't need to sell alcohol. We don't need to sell groceries. We don't need to sell marijuana. We don't need to sell any of that stuff, and let the private sector do it. Thank you.
As a follow-up to what Hans said, there was legislation this year in the state House and Senate to allow all grocery stores to sell beer and wine. Those bills were withdrawn. Again, it would need to be state legislation. Next, David.
So thank you, Susan. So we need to be doing everything we can to support our restaurant owners, right? So they risk their own capital, they're paying taxes, they hire employees, and they make our communities feel like communities. And so I've convened a number of restaurant roundtables over the past many years to find out what we can do to best support restaurants. And we have a whole list of things that we need to do, like make sure that we have consistent regulations, that our permitting process are more streamlined. And then there's bigger things like transportation solutions, childcare, access to capital. We need to do all of that. But as it relates specifically to your question about alcohol, mixed messages. So there's some restaurant owners that I found that are in favor, and they think that it does a good job, particularly those that don't have a large variety of alcohol beverages that they sell. Other restaurant owners it drives them absolutely crazy, and they want better access, better selection, on being able to order at different times. And so what I've proposed is let's have it both ways. Let's have it both ways. Let's open it up to competition so that those that enjoy ABS can continue to use those services. Those that want to go to direct, they can do that as well. Because our restaurants need to be thriving, and we're not creating enough new ones. And I'll just describe for you real quickly the last restaurant roundtable we had. I asked about 18 folks or so in the room. I said, how many are planning on opening up a new restaurant? And about 7 hands flew up. And then I said, who's going to open up a new restaurant in Montgomery County? And all the hands went down.
30 seconds.
And one of the owners, it was from Founding Farmers, Dan Simon, said, I said, why? And he said, it's not, even if I could get used to the regulations that you have in this county today, I'm afraid what you'll do next. And so I'm the county executive that's going to create an environment so that our restaurants can thrive. And they want to open up multiple restaurants here.
Okay, finally, Mr. Hucker.
Thanks, Susan. Great to have an expert like you here with us. Look, our alcohol beverage services is overall a great asset to the county on the whole. It doesn't mean it's perfect, but I served in Annapolis with colleagues from all over the county, all over the state. Many counties would create a system just like ours if they could do so without the political opposition. It's great for taxpayers because it brings in lots of revenue that otherwise would have to be paid for by taxpayers, but it also supports greater public health and safety. We don't want to be a community that has a liquor store on every corner. And I served on the committee in Annapolis that regulates alcohol. Believe me, you do not want the crime and the other problems that other counties have with their privatized liquor stores. We have to continue to improve our system and not end it. I worked with all the local brew pubs in Silver Spring to help them get started. I worked with Hans to expand wineries and breweries up county, and he's done great work on that. And I've repeatedly worked with ABS to hold listening sessions with restaurant owners to advocate for important reforms. They now have better software. They now have better delivery systems and more timely deliveries. I've pushed for larger and nicer stores and better selections and more marketing of local wine and beer. They need more reforms, but no one here can honestly propose privatizing the system without telling us how you want to either cut $40 million in tax revenue each year or how you would raise taxes to replace that. We need to retain the revenue. We need to continue to expand our stores and consumer selection so we have a better consumer product and more customer-facing reforms, customer-friendly reforms. As county executive, I would continue to champion the reform that's been happening, but wouldn't want to privatize it because there's no way to get, I won't raise taxes by 40 million or cut our staff by $40 million. Thanks.
Okay. We had a few more questions, but it's time to close. So we're going to closings and we're going to go in the reverse order alphabetically. So it's going to be Reamer, Hucker, Elrich, and Blair. You've got 2 minutes closing statements.
Okay. Well, this has been a great discussion. I think we've been able to talk about a lot of the issues that really matter to us. But one that we haven't touched yet on much is climate. And I am really dedicated to making progress on climate locally. And one of the ways that we can make that happen is with a more aggressive effort on solar. Solar and wind generation is how we will shut down coal-fired power plants. And the emissions that come from coal generation is what is feeding so much of the climate crisis. And if we're going to be able to make a change, we're going to have to generate solar everywhere, every rooftop, every parking lot, and on the ground. So 2 years ago, Councilmember Hucker and I worked together to introduce a change in zoning because, believe it or not, if you own agricultural land in this county, you cannot install solar anywhere except for like on the rooftop of your barn. And even that is very limited. So we wanted farmers to be able to combine agriculture with solar. In other words, grazing sheep under solar arrays, raising crops, growing pollinator plants for the bees to support the crops. Well, unfortunately, that measure, even though it could have powered 50,000 homes in the county with just less than 2% of the land used in this dual capacity, generating millions of dollars in tax revenue that could have been used to support small farmers getting
30 seconds.
And providing subscriptions to solar for low-income residents at a discounted rate. That measure was gutted at the county council, thanks in large part to the county executive who led the fight against it. And I think we need leadership that gets it. Mr. Blair also is leaning in the wrong direction on climate, opposing the building energy performance standards at the local level, silent on solar in the ag reserve. We need climate leadership in this county that will make things happen. Thank you.
Mr. Hucker.
Thank you, Susan, and everybody at the club for holding this. It's great to be with you, but honestly, of course, I never thought I'd be running for county executive at this point. But from the front row seat again that I've held as the vice president and then the president of the council elected by my colleagues, I don't have enough time to tell you in how many ways we miss opportunities and are unfortunately declining compared to Prince George's and Howard and DC and Fairfax. The data show that indisputably. So I had a safe reelection. I don't even have an opponent for reelection, but so many people encouraged me to get in this race, and out of conscience, I needed to know that I offered solutions to these problems, because for my whole career, I've been bringing people together to solve problems like this. And the solutions are right in front of us. We see that at the county council all the time. I know you solve the problems by listening to the people closest to the problem, by bringing people together and getting things done. And of all of us here, I have an unmatched record of legislative accomplishments in government. And that's what we need. We need not just experience, we need effectiveness. I know how to disagree without being disagreeable. I obviously have good relationships with all my colleagues, or they wouldn't have elected me the last 2 years. My leadership was very productive, along with Council Member Katz under his presidency when I was vice president, because Anthony Fauci saluted the council under my leadership for our important work leading the COVID response. And of course, we got awards, as I mentioned, from the NAACP and an affordable housing group for our leadership. That's what I could do much more so as county executive.
30 seconds.
If we turn the county in the right direction. We have to address the 2 Montgomery counties with urgency and not just talk. We have to address the decline of our schools, bring back jobs, address racial equity and take it seriously, and build the housing we need. And yes, fight climate change. Councilmember Reamer is right. And that's why I just passed the most significant climate bill we've ever passed. We have to bridge the gaps between the 2 Montgomery counties and not just talk about problems. We actually have to solve them. If I'm county executive, I'll do that with your help. Thank you so much.
Mark Elrich.
Unmute, please, Mark.
So thank you all for coming in this morning, and I appreciate the audience here. I want to talk about a couple of things. First of all, in the ag reserve and solar, we proposed 1,000 acres. The other bill was about 2,000 acres. You can't actually build any right now because of the state regulations. The Potomac Edison can only accept about 2.7 megawatts of power a year for the next 3 years, and that's stymied. We have not had a single county farmer who has applied get accepted. They've been told they go on a waiting list. That's real. On budgets, it is great to talk about all the things you would do, but I'll point out that the county's budget increased. The school spending went from, $2,562,000,000 in 21 down to $2,551,000,000 in 22, and their spending affordability guidelines for 23 are $2,558,000,000, not even close to funding what the school system asked for. And these are the council's spending affordability guidelines around which I'm supposed to construct the budget. On capital guidelines, we proposed $300 million going down to 290 and staying at 290 over the 6 years of the CIP. That would have brought in $1.75 billion. The council's budget proposed going from 300 million down to 270 million,
30
and that would have
seconds.
produced $1.68 billion. In other words, this is a $70 billion decrease over 6 years in the face of increasing requests from the school system. So you got to own what you did. And that's something that the council has been really good about not owning. It's like not owning that the housing and development policies that were passed didn't actually produce either the housing or the economic development. If we're in a stall, we're in a stall because people didn't understand what
Thank
we
you, Mark.
done in Montgomery County.
And finally, David Blair.
So listening to the conversation this morning, there's a lot of similarities with the candidates and our vision. And while we differ slightly on many issues, but things like creating jobs, a safer community, our schools we have in common. The big difference is executive leadership. It's setting a vision for this county. And that's what I've done in my career. So when we think about setting a vision, it's big, bold ideas. Like, I believe we should have a 5,000 seat venue so that our high school students actually don't need to leave the county for their graduations. I believe we should triple our solar production. I believe that 100% of our kids that are graduating from high school should be either career ready or college ready. So as an executive, you're setting a big vision. You're recruiting and retaining the talent to execute. You collaborate, you remove obstacles, and then you get out of the way and you let them get the job done. It's what I did when we were building our company in Rockville. We had incredible talent. And so we were able to pull together teams. And not only were we a Fortune 500 company, we were one of the world's most admired healthcare companies for how we were able to lower costs for our members on healthcare costs. So that's what executive leadership is all about. And that's what I'll bring. I'll bring executive leadership, and I'll bring a fresh approach to county government to move it forward for everyone. And so, Susan, thank you for coordinating today. Thank you all for your time this morning, and hope we get to see you all on the campaign trail sometime soon.
Thank you all, gentlemen, very, very, very much for being here today. There is a lot to cover, and you did a great job. And I want to remind all of you, April 11th, we are going to have the sheriff's candidates. So I hope that you'll be with us then, and congratulations to everyone who is the candidate. It is hard work. So thank you all very much. Enjoy the sunshine. And I look forward to seeing all of you very soon at the Tasty Diner. Bye, everybody. Thank you for coming.
Bye now. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you,
Bye.
Michael.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Susan.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Susan.
Bye, guys.
Myself
Michael,
and
you're
Commissioner,
amazing.
Stay in touch.
Have a good day, everyone.